Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. Today we're going to be continuing on in the grand tradition of creating videos designed to help you guys counter the newer champions. Today we're going to be talking about Vex, the Gloomist, of course, and what you guys can do against her in your own games should she be picked. Now, Vex is a very interesting champion because unlike a lot of the other champions that I've covered previously, like Viego or Samira or Gwen, which all those champions are very generalist, there are situations in which they are quite strong, but there are a lot of situations that they can just be played into and not have a lot to worry about or a lot of very obvious counters. Vex is different in that Vex very clearly has a team composition she wants to be played into, right? She wants to be played against an enemy team composition with a lot of dashes or against an enemy laner with a lot of dashes. She's the kind of champion that really wants to be picked in a specific scenario, right? In a similar fashion to picking Malphite into an AD-heavy team composition or Galio into an MR-heavy composition. Really, Vex is here to be picked into a heavy mobility composition in order to punish it. So in that regard, her applicability is a little narrower than I think it would be for a lot of other champions, but that doesn't mean that she can't be played in a generic composition and still do well. So the guide here is intended to give you guys some degree of emphasis on how you can deal with her, even if she's not in her particular strongest matchup. Now, the fun thing about Vex is that she has a surprising amount of burst coupled with sort of consistent and easily applied CC, which means that she's able to provide a lot of value to her team. She's able to do a lot of upfront damage to sort of immediately chunk people out. She has an AoE Terrify, which is pretty good, and worse than that, she also has the ability to reset her ultimate multiple times in a team fight, allowing her to continue a play even after the break of a fight and someone's already been killed. Vex can then chase you down, get another Terrify, and sort of proceed with there, especially with how much damage she can do. That can be pretty overwhelming in a lot of scenarios, but that doesn't mean that she's unbeatable, and in fact shutting her down in the early stages of the game can really limit what she wants to do. In that regard, a lot of the advice I'm going to be giving is going to be talking about playing around her in lane, as if you're able to shut out Vex's ability to gain items and get damage, she doesn't really do that much. One Terrify is not that powerful, and Vex's ability to reset her Terrify isn't as good as I think a lot of people think it is. Vex really needs to be either laning her E's and then able to proc the Gloom on every single person that got hit by the E in order to reset that cooldown, or needs to be played into a composition with a lot of dashes, which can really limit her ability to get multiple Terrifies outside of her preferred enemy team compositions. So the biggest thing you can do when playing against Vex is to play around her passive. This sounds obvious, but her passive, especially in the early game, is on a pretty long cooldown, again, unless she's able to consistently proc the second half of her passive, which isn't easy to do unless you're playing a dash champion. There is some way for Vex to do this. For example, if she uses her E on the entire wave, and then is able to Q or W the entire wave to proc all the Gloom all at once and get a pretty hefty chunk of her passive cooldown back up, that can help, but it's still not going to get the entire passive up. And if she is using her abilities in that regard, then she's not saving her passive to actually handle you in lane, right? If you're an engaged champion in the mid lane, like an Assassin or Akshan or somebody like that, and Vex is using her passive just for wave clear, then you have the ability to engage on her basically scot-free, because what is she going to do? She will not be able to reset that passive fast enough in order to get you off of her, and like I said before, unless she can kill you with one burst combo, she doesn't have the fast enough cooldowns to sort of DPS you at that point on. Her cooldowns are decently long, which does allow you to punish her from that point onwards if she's not holding on to the passive. And as with Annie, Vex can't cast any spells if she's trying to hold on to her passive, so in that regard, you can shove her in if you're playing a mage with reasonable wave clear, which then forces her to either use her passive or lose it. Additionally, I kind of already touched on this as well, a Vex with that passive doesn't trade very well. Her Q and her E are very telegraphed abilities. You can tell where the E is going to form, and as long as you're already in motion when the E starts, you should be able to walk out of it unless she gets a good prediction. And Q telegraphs where it's going to go because it's very slow to start with, allowing you to sidestep the ability as it accelerates and also gets narrower at the exact same time. So again, these abilities are very easy to dodge if you cast them at maximum range, and W can't hurt you at all if you stay away from her, and W is a very inefficient ability if you're only using it for the shield. Obviously, Vex will use it just to sponge off some of the damage she might take from a range, but if she's not getting the damage off of it, that mana cost is going to hurt a lot more than if she's actually able to get the damage off of it as well. So in that regard, fellow mages can easily bully her, provided that they have no Terrify to be scared of, pun totally intended. And even dashing champions can deal with Vex in lane, provided her passive is on cooldown. So if she fishes for a Terrify skill shot and misses, you can immediately go for the punish, right? Yasuo can dash through all of the minions to try and get on top of her. Aurelia can do the same thing, stacking up her passive and then dashing on top of the Vex. Akshan can immediately go for the hookshot now that his dash can't be interrupted. Like, Vex has to be careful. This is not the kind of champion that just brain dead presses a button and stops you in your tracks and then laughs away. Like, this is the kind of champion that needs to be played very carefully. She has a good degree of threat into mobile champions, but she is not so powerful as to just shut them out of the game entirely. So in that regard, there is a lot of things that you can do, even on a mobile champion, to deal with this champion in lane. The second thing, of course, is to pick accordingly, and this does get into champ select a little bit, but if you do see a Vex early picked, or you at least still have your pick available to deal with her and you're fairly certain she's going to be in your lane, you do have the option of choosing champions that can punish her a lot more than what you may have been intending to play. Vex isn't going to 100% counter a mobile champion like Yasuo or Yone or Aurelia, but she does get a lot more value against them, and so in that regard, I would still advise against playing those champions into Vex, because as long as she remembers to auto-attack you and hold on to Terrify, like, you're gonna have a bad time, because there's just not a lot you'll be able to do, assuming the Vex is good enough to actually punish you if you go for all-ins. Mages with high range are exceptionally good into Vex. Her abilities are really bad when cast at max range, as I mentioned before, which gives mages plenty of room to either bully her or force her under tower. And because her Q is slow in startup and gets narrower, E takes longer to go off, yada yada. So in that regard, if you stay on the move and you're able to just stay focused on the wave, then Vex is forced to constantly use her Terrify and can't get any value off of that, which just makes her really sad. The other fun thing that mages have is that because they can go for an early Verdant Barrier into Banshee's Veil really hoses Vex, because she has to hit you with a skill shot in order to pop the Banshees, and then she has to wait for her Terrify to come back off cooldown, and then she has to try and hit another skill shot, right? Unlike a lot of other champions that can just kind of throw an ability at you, who cares, and pop the Banshees, and then look to make the all-in very shortly afterwards, Vex's longish cooldowns, coupled with the fact that she has to wait on her passive to come back up, really just means that Banshee's Veil totally hoses her in what she tries to do, and also then doubles as protection against her ultimate if you're sort of on the outskirts of a fight and Vex is looking to try and R to you and burst you down. Well, Banshee's Veil stops that. So, and you only really can build a Banshee's Veil if you're a mage because of how that item's been tuned. So it ends up being a very powerful counter pick. If the Vex does get ahead and you're playing a mage, get a Banshee's Veil. It will do you wonders at staying alive. Vex is also a surprisingly squishy champion, which makes burst mages a very good pick. They don't have mobility that can be punished or interrupted, but they also have the damage to outright kill Vex if they're able to hit their CC. And so if you're not if you're not dealing with her mid lane, if you pick a dashless champion or just champs that only have like one non-resettable dash like Corki, that can help limit her overall power. Obviously, you don't need to see a Vex and try to play only immobile champions. That's not that relevant. But if you're playing a champion like Corki or like Caitlyn, for example, where they have exactly one dash in their kit, and usually you're using it to get away from somebody, not trying to close the gap, then Vex may not even be able to get in range to punish you for using a dash, right? If Caitlyn's Eing backwards, then Vex probably won't be able to actually auto-attack the Caitlyn and get the bonus damage and help reset her passive. Like, that's just not going to happen. So if you are choosing these champions with extremely high amounts of mobility, Callista, for example, yeah, okay, you're going to have a bad time. But choosing a champion with one dash or blink, you're probably all right, especially if that's a dash that the champion can't afford to use off cooldown because it's not safe to do so, right? LeBlanc, for example, is a champion with only one dash, but I would still advise against playing into Vex because of how easily Vex can stuff Distortion. But Corki, totally fine. The other thing I would mention is to watch out for Vex's teamfighting prowess. She is very scary in teamfights, and she has two major roles, which is either as follow-up crowd control or a sort of wait and pounce playstyle, as I alluded to before. Vex can kind of hang out on the outskirts of a fight, looking for a lone squishy to snipe with her R, which has a range measured in screens, so you do have to watch out for that sort of looming from the darkness, because if she does hit it, then she can follow it in, get a Terrify, dump all of her damage on top of a target, then either Zhonya's to break aggro, or use her R reset, because that ability does resets, to dash back to a frontliner, or to continue the play onto another hapless squishy. In that regard, though, if she is trying to wait and pounce, you have the ability of watching for her R. If you don't see Vex at the break of a fight, make sure you're paying attention to any Rs from the darkness, because if it does appear and you dodge it, then Vex is in an even worse position than if she had just tried to fight front to back with her team. The other thing she can do, obviously, is follow up CC, wait for the main team initiation, and then dash onto a front line, terrify them, get a bunch of damage down, ideally in an AoE, and ideally kill the front line immediately. In this regard, you can kind of think of her like a Mumu. If the whole team is grouped up on a single spot, of course Vex is going to punish you, right? But you were already probably getting punished by the rest of the enemy team just dumping all their damage on that one spot. So in that regard, if you stay away from Vex, you should be fairly safe to proceed from there. And finally, itemization CC. I did talk a little bit about Verdant Barrier earlier. If you are playing an AD champion mid lane, especially a very mobile one, Hex Drinker is really good because it reduces her burst and therefore her kill potential. Mercury's Treads, again, super useful item by reducing the duration of her Terrifies and just making you take less damage overall. And remember, as a burst mage, Vex wants to kill you in one combo. She really doesn't want to have to sit in a fight and try to awkwardly auto-attack you to death or wait for her cooldowns to come back up. So in that regard, if you can survive that initial burst, you do have the ability of just kind of killing her from there, so even a little bit of magic resistance can help. And remember, of course, that Vex is very squishy, so if she is using abilities recklessly, or if she is getting herself in a situation where she can't kill you, feel free to trade back with her. This is not the kind of champion that has the sustained amount of damage that you have to be that scared of. If she doesn't kill you in one combo, and she did R on top of you, right, then just go to town, because she doesn't have any way out, she has no more cooldowns left, and you can kind of body her from there. Anyways, that's going to be it for me today, guys. I hope you guys found this guide useful in how you can counter Vex in your own games. If you have any other advice, though, please let me know down in the comment section below. I'm sure there are a lot of other people who are here that would love to hear, your guys' advice on what you can do about her. If you enjoyed the video today, go ahead and leave it a like. And if you really enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. And I'll talk to you all later.